All right, YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast talking Auburn football. Go ahead and subscribe to Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. Okay, let's go ahead and get this membership thing going as well. And also, I'm going to leave the Cash App in the comment section. Let's get this. Let's pass the virtual collection plate. I appreciate you all sending a brother a little love here on Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. Man, been doing this, man, 3 years, man. I appreciate the support, all the subscribers. There's so many I can't name. So many also that are on other platforms, that support other platforms, that are fans of other teams in the SEC. And definitely want to give a shout out to the fans that supported during the Auburn versus Oregon game back in 2019. Man, that was huge. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. We got a lot of things to unpack tonight as we start to ease into the 2022 season. A lot of changes going on in other conferences. We're going to first talk about the Pac-12. The Pac-12 has changed their format. Now, many of you know that in most conferences, what happens is, especially if you have divisions, the winner of each division, let's just say they're 7-2 and everybody else is what they are. You have the two highest percentage winners in the division wins and loss columns that make it to the conference championship. The Pac-12 has decided to change their format to where the overall winning percentage will be the two teams that represent in the conference. This could be a good thing for the Pac-12, but I don't think it will make a big difference because for the most part, the two best teams have always represented. I think the only time that this wasn't the case, I think it was Stanford, USC, and maybe another school that were all ranked in the top 15. And that was a thing at that point. But for the most part, this is not really a change that the Pac-12 needed to make. For the most part, the two best teams have represented in the Pac-12 conference. Now, there have been other conferences where this could have been the case, like the Big 12. There have been some times where it was kind of lopsided, where the best team was in the top 4, top 5, and the other team in the other division wasn't even ranked. I could see where it could happen there. In the ACC, there's been some cases where, you have a Clemson and then you face a Virginia team that you could clearly beat. So I could see where it could kind of even the playing field there. But for the most part, I don't see why this is a thing that's needed in the Pac-12. Now, I like the premise of it. You want to put the two best teams in the conference championship. And you also want to send the best team that loses, because typically when you have Power 5 conferences like this, the team that loses goes to New Year's Six Bowl, so you don't want to embarrass the conference there. But for the most part, I just don't see where this is a huge deal, and I don't think it should cause a lot of uproar as far as the Pac-12. Now, the Pac-12 is going to be very interesting this year. You got Oregon, who is still trying to find their dominance in the Pac-12, but then you have a lot of noise coming out of USC to where they could take their spot back in the Pac-12. We'll see how that goes. Go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speak Sports Auburn, and we are on tonight. So let's go to Auburn recruiting. Is Auburn recruiting really that bad? Now, if you look at the media, you would think that Auburn is among the dregs. Now, let me tell you what a dreg is. If you make some tea, right? The dregs is those items, those little particles that kind of sits around the bottom of the sweet tea. That's your Vanderbilts. That's typically your Mississippi schools kind of hang out around the dregs every now and then. South Carolina kind of eases down in there every now and then. Tennessee, which was a dumpster fire, was there for a little bit. Arkansas was definitely there. The media, for some reason, the media wants so bad for Auburn to be among those types of teams. Now, Auburn, not necessarily a high tier Power 5 football team, but they're definitely not a team that hangs out with the dregs. They're not a team that goes 3-8 consecutively, at least in the recent history. Because what has happened in recent history, let's go back to 2012, for example, goes 3-9 and then goes to the national championship the next year. You look at 2010, goes like 7-5 or 6-5, goes to the national championship the next year. Now there have been some times where Auburn has had, like a couple of 5 and 6 years, and back in the '60s went 4-8. Back before the Pat Dye era, there was kind of a dark age of Auburn football, so to speak. But for the most part, Auburn is just not a team that hangs out in that dreg area. So it leads me to get to this point. Is Auburn recruiting really that bad? I had a chance to look at all of the teams from the 2022 recruiting stats from 24/7. That's where I usually gain my reference point. And I am a guy that I look at the ranking, the 21 ranking, and I'm a numbers guy because that's what I do for a living. I have to crunch numbers. I have to really dissect what's really going on, because you look at profit and loss statements and things like that. So you got to look at the real numbers. And the numbers show, and for all of you guys that like to ease into the sunshine pumping thing, I'm not doing that. I'm just looking at real numbers as it relates to real things. Auburn's recruits have a ranking of 89%. And although that puts them kind of sort of a little bit lower in the SEC ranking, and we're going to get to the reason why you're nervous about that in a second. But at an 89 ranking, that puts Auburn within the top 5, because you have Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia, who, yeah, they're in the 90%. I mean, they have 5-star recruits. They've done a great job of recruiting. Really good job. And I think they're going to really do well. Texas A&M, we got to see what they're going to do with their recruits. They've done a good job there. They've really acclimated themselves into the physicality of the SEC. That started with Kevin Sumlin. I think Kevin Sumlin did a good job of recognizing what was needed to win in the SEC. And I will kind of roll the dice and say that Texas A&M might have gotten rid of Kevin Sumlin a little bit too early. But then you bring on Jimbo Fisher. He takes up the torch, and he's doing a really good job of recruiting. But even with a good job of recruiting, still in that middle tier of the SEC, 8-4, 7-5, 9-4, that kind of thing. So Auburn, though, a lot of media outlets think that Auburn will be a 4-8 team. I'm not arguing that. I'm not the guy that says, hey, hell no, there's no way that can happen, because it really can. Looking at Auburn's schedule, looking at the win opportunities, Auburn does have a lot of these types of games at home, to where, Auburn is a really tough place to play. So considering where that lies, that could be a thing. But we're not going to get into that. What I want to talk about, though, is the disdain for Bryan Harsin. I think Bryan Harsin is a good coach. But why is it that the media, Auburn fans, well, I'm not going to speak for all Auburn fans, but I'm going to speak for a good subculture of Auburn fans. Why there is this crazy disdain for a guy that carries himself well. He's very systematic. He's very meticulous about what he wants in his program. The thing about this is Bryan Harsin represents something that Auburn is not used to. Auburn is not used to a coach that says, in his demeanor, one, F you, I'm going to run my program the way I want to run it. Two, he's got all his guys. He's got guys that he's worked with for a while, Smeding, and he's bought on Jimmy Brumbaugh. And, you know, a lot of folks are like, these are not the big names that we want to take Auburn to the next level quickly. Because Auburn fans are getting nervous. They're seeing those Mississippi schools who are not recruiting as well as Auburn, as well as you think they are. They're still in the middle pack. They still don't have the high-end 5-star recruits. And the Auburn fans are getting a little nervous. They're scared that they're looking at dumpster fires that we've seen in the past, like Arkansas and Tennessee. They're seeing that stuff and they're like, man, we're about to be in bad shape. Big shout out to True Auburn Champion, that is an adamant talker of facility talk, and he says that things are pretty bad at Auburn. True Auburn Champion, I love you, bro. But I have to call you out. You were the guy that talked this same talk last year, and Auburn had a stretch to where they were winning against Arkansas. Ole Miss had a good stretch going on. But here's what happened. Bo Nix gets injured. A couple of key offensive linemen get injured. And now you have Auburn limping into the latter part of the season. Now, Auburn had opportunities. Don't get me wrong. I think Auburn should have beat Mississippi State. I think Auburn should have beat South Carolina. Auburn had an opportunity to win against Alabama. And damn sure should have beat Houston. So we're not going to make it seem like it was cool that Auburn lost those games. You got to look at what happened in that. Bryan Harsin is a guy that inherited a team. A lot of guys left. And he had to piece together a team. Guys that didn't know each other, hadn't played with each other. They played very well. They should have. Now, I'll say this. The game that really haunts me to this day is the fact that Auburn should have beat Penn State on the road. I think Auburn was the better team. Auburn was the more physical team. I don't think the coaching staff was prepared. I think the play calling in situational circumstances was really questionable. That cost that game. Also in South Carolina, a lot of questionable play calling in that game. But why all the Bryan Harsin hate? But the reason why there's a lot of Bryan Harsin hate is because you want the big name. You want the Lane Kiffin. You want the guy that has the big name, that has the reputation. But is that really what you want for Auburn? Bryan Harsin is a guy, and I'm not going to windmill for this guy, and I'm not going to say that he's the savior and that he's going to be ultimately successful, because that has to be proven on the field. But you got to give the guy a chance, and I think he's shown everything possible, resilience, because, I mean, that bullshit that he went through in the offseason, that would have been enough for me to say, look, you know, I've uprooted my family to come over here to make the transcontinental move to Auburn to deal with this. And and in my standpoint, because I've been there before as a businessman, I've gone to different situations to where I'm like, I've left my comfort zone to take a chance to deal with this kind of stuff. No, I think we got to give the guy a shot. We got to give this guy a shot. When have we seen? I love Gus Malzahn, and I actually played his case all the way to the end. But I've never heard about Gus Malzahn attacking the Alabama market for recruits, unless the media outlets just didn't say nothing about it. Why do you hate Bryan Harsin so much? Because he's different. Because he comes from the Mountain West Conference, or wherever the hell he came from before he came to Auburn at Boise State. A lot of success. Beat some Power 5 teams. This is a guy that can coach football. And showed it at points last year. Does that mean he's going to be successful? Absolutely not. That doesn't mean that. But all of the coaches that you hire them based on potential energy. They took a chance on Nick Saban back in the day. He wasn't a high-end coach. He developed himself. He learned a lot when he coached NFL football. Then he came back and took those same principles and said, look, I want to coach Alabama. I got the resources. I got the knowledge. Alabama was sick and tired of losing football games, especially tired of losing to Auburn. And that's where you have it. Why all the Bryan Harsin hate? We got people in the comment section, which I love for sure, the definite supporters of the channel, that just don't like him. Why? Here's my opinion. He's not a big name. We don't know him. He was the last resort because they feel like he's the last resort because all the other guys that we could have hired wouldn't take the job. Maybe, maybe not. What do you think about this video, guys? My name is Kennard Vernon Stewart. I am your Auburn enthusiast, and I think I give some pretty good analysis on this program. Hey, we need some wide receivers. We need some. Actually, we just got a defensive lineman that I'm going to talk about tomorrow. Like this video, comment, and share with your Auburn friends. Because, see, here's the skinny on Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. Man, we got to get to 5K. There's no way with the quality of content and the quality of the comment section that we have on this channel that we should not be at 5K, and that I should not have at least, I'd say, about 5 Cash Apps tonight. Like the video, comment, and subscribe. Become a member to your channel, my channel, Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. And you know what it is. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger. War Eagle.